All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you to Delaware County for having me here today to talk about really what I like to think is 200 years of baseball history in Delaware County. Um, I'll get into who I am first here, but I want to make sure people understand. So the title that came out to promote this was From Honest Eddie to Louisville Slugger, which are both Hancock area ties. But this presentation goes way back, way back, way before those two entities existed. So we'll touch upon that later. But I titled it "Fun Facts, Folklore, and Fascinating Characters." Hopefully, by the end of this, you still think I'm one of those fascinating characters. So who am I? So my name's Colin Miller. I joined the Fleischmann's Mountain Athletic Club vintage baseball team in 2007, which was basically an original team that dated back to the 1890s in Fleischmann's, New York, right on the easternmost township in Delaware County, below Bel Air ski area. And when I joined, I was a baseball player. I was actually living right here in Delhi in the county seat. I looked forward to joining a team in Roxbury. And they said, and I've been playing 19th century baseball ever since. And I'm originally from the Binghamton area. And back then, I was really just a player. I'd show up and play ball and not really know too much about the history of baseball in the area or even the rules of 19th century baseball. But since then, I've kind of developed an interest in that because it helps us tell the story to people who come to our games, and really helps me appreciate it even more. And there are a lot of rule changes, and it helps me understand the rules a lot better so I don't make foolish decisions on the ball field. So first, let's start off with some myth busting. Abner Doubleday did not invent baseball in Cooperstown in 1839. Neither did Edward B. Chase in Hamden in 1825. However, the challenge was issued in July 12th, 1825 in the Delhi Gazette. A challenge was issued by Edward at the home of Edward B. Chase and a number of his comrades. And if you go through the 1856 Delaware County Gould map, you will notice a lot of those names on that are Chase Brook. There's Peak Brook, I believe. Some of these other places, Peaks Brook. These are places that you can actually find these gentlemen on that map. But it's still, sometimes Hamden wants to lay claim to baseball's beginnings, and it just ain't so. What really is interesting, though, is that was perhaps the first known reference to money being offered for a game, because they actually offered $1 per game to the people that wanted to play, they were seeking to play. So, where does it show up first? The first printed reference to baseball is in 1744. Predates our revolution, right? So, a little pretty pocketbook in English children's games was published, and that was the first appearance of the word baseball. In America, though, the first appearance in print was actually in the town record in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It's since now become the broken window bylaw. It's been referred to as the broken window bylaw. No person or inhabitant of said town shall be permitted to play any game, and wicket, cricket, baseball, bat ball, football, cats, fives, or other games with a ball within the distance of 80 yards of the said meeting house, because they were afraid it was going to break a window. So 1791 is where it shows up. Interestingly enough, Hamden was founded by people from Springfield, Massachusetts area, so Western Massachusetts. So it's plausible, because we don't actually know whether we don't know if Edward B. Chase hosted a baseball game that day. We can make assumptions, but that's about as good as it gets. But we do know those two things. If baseball was being played in 1790s, so much to the point that it was referred to as baseball, then it's plausible that the folks from Springfield that founded, it was plausible that Edward B. Chase and his comrades were actually descendants or, offspring of the people who founded the town of Hamden, who really came there first, because they would have been about in their 20s, late teens, early 20s. So the other thing that's interesting to opine on is, what did it look like? So it was referred to as baseball in that challenge. It's really, it's baseball. It's just an alternate spelling. Baseball in the 19th century had all kinds of spellings. Most often you see it not hyphenated, but you just see a space. Baseball, 2 words. And it actually continued as 2 words until 1895, which is where it starts showing up more as 1 word than 2. But what did it look like in 1825? That's what we were trying to figure out when we played a game last year in Hamden at the Bicentennial. We actually had a game at Crawford Field, and a number of us got together and we tried to figure out what rules might have then they played, because there were really no codified rules of baseball in 1825. In fact, that doesn't come along until 1845 with the Knickerbocker Baseball Club. So what did it look like? Well, certainly there were handmade balls. They were much smaller than what baseballs became in the 1860s and certainly today. There was something called soaking the runner. So you could bean the runner. That actually comes, I asked John Thorne, who's an official historian in Major League Baseball, where did that soaking come from? And it's actually they used to have a poison ball that was a ball that was filled with poison that they would soak somebody with it. It'd break the ball on them and they would basically get poisoned. So that wasn't a baseball thing, but that soaking term came from that poison ball. So you could soak the runner to get it out. There was no foul territory. There was no gloves, no uniforms, no bases, as we think of bases, but there were 4 posts. So they set up 4 posts in kind of a circular fashion. They didn't need to be equidistant. They could just be whatever you could fit into a space. They typically played 1 out, all out. So if you had 10 players, all 10 would be out before you had to switch sides. Balls caught on 1 bound or 2 would have been an out, and the first team to tally 21 aces or tallies, that would be the end of the game. First team to 21. So you just don't know whether it happened. Did they actually play it? What happened? A video here that I'll play, and it's got me in the background kind of giving an introduction to one of the players. And if you'll notice, when he hits the ball, there's a few different things that happen that I can explain afterwards, but it's just a real brief video. So let's give it a watch. And
Jason Party, polecat extraordinaire, Hamden grown, born and raised. But you have to pitch the ball to be hit. The object is to get a ball in play. Hey! 2 tallies. 2 tallies for the Edwards. We're the Edwards versus the Harrys.
Yes. So that day we were the Edwards versus the Harrys, and if you notice, there's a few different things going on there. One, the pitcher throws the ball overhand. Okay, the rules when they were first codified, they said ball must be pitched, not thrown. Pitches are underhand, throws are overhand. So because there wasn't any rules, that became a rule. They didn't want you to throw it overhand. They actually said pitch. So that's one thing that was Ben Cairns, Delhi, born and bred. He was pitching to Jason Party that day, and that's why I told him he threw it, and I said no, pitch it. The other thing Jason did, of course, he's using a birch log as a bat. So bats were real primitive back then. We know that. They probably were, they referred to them in the later 1800s as wagon tongues. But, you know, he's using a stick. The other thing is he hit the ball and it went behind him, which he still was trying to run. There was no foul territory, right? So you could hit the ball in any direction. So can you imagine you swip around, you hit the ball into the woods, you'd probably get yelled at by everyone because they would lose the only baseball they had. The other thing I mentioned is, you know, 2 runs had come in on something that seemingly was a foul ball. But see, there was no foul ball. So he just hit it backwards. And so there's just a lot of different things. So baseball 1825 is wildly different from what we see today. So I don't have a tremendous amount of information on pre-Civil War baseball in Delaware County. Hopefully people watching this presentation at home or here would say, oh, hey, you know, I found something out. But right now it seems to be a place, there is a lot of research about pre-Civil War baseball, just I don't have a lot of stuff for here where we live. So what happened between 1825 and the Civil War? I don't know. And try to figure that out. There's not many newspapers that are still around from that back then. So it's really written accounts, journals, maybe a photograph or two, but I do share this picture. This is an 1859 picture of the Syracuse Baseball Club that had just formed from the Onondaga Historical Association. I actually just got this in an email today, so I thought it was pretty cool. Central New York, you know, Central New York was starting to adopt baseball, but this was 1859. So 1825 to the 1850s, I just, it's a void. I don't have a lot of information. Same is true for 1860 to 1890. A lot appears in newspapers, and I have a few to share here, but it needs to go deeper. We need more exploration there. I'd love to know more. These are some examples. In 1860, you had a game between the Hancock and the Franklin clubs. It says Franklin reached 75. I'm pretty sure that means 7-5, because if you read that closely, so Hancock was 7 ahead, then they broke for dinner, and then it says Franklin reached 75, right ahead of their opponents. Well, 75 is way ahead of their opponents if that's the case. So I'm pretty sure that means 7-5. That was from 1860. So I don't have anything prior to that. The second game of baseball between the Highlanders of Bovina and the Delhi Club at the fairgrounds on Thursday last resulted in the defeat of the Highlanders by 16 scores. So that was 1873. In Stamford, 1873, the Delhi boys traveled all the way up to Stamford to beat them by a score of 112 to 33. Can you imagine? You think baseball is long now. It says, after the game was ended, the Delhi club gave 3 cheers and a tiger. That's like they give them a tiger. That was a common thing. They gave them 3 cheers and a tiger for their opponent, which we were sorry to say was not answered by a similar compliment from the Stamford club. So Stamford was pretty bummed out, and rightfully so. After a 4-hour game, losing 112 to 33, I'm not sure I would even want to play again. So that was in 73, and the rules are crazy. I could do a whole presentation just on the rules, but 1870s baseball, the rules get really wacky, which explains the crazy scores. Mind you, nobody's playing with gloves, so lots of errors. But if you look at the box score in there, I mean, look at the players are scoring 15, 14, 13 runs apiece. Like, geez. The Hobart Independent, fast forward, 1886. 9 innings were played. Stanford obviously figured out how to play baseball. So that's a little bit more reasonable, what you see in the 1880s. Remember, they're still playing without gloves. Actually, in 1886, you could get 7 balls to a walk. The pitching was actually from not a mound, but it was from a box that was 7 foot by 4 foot and only 50 feet away from home plate. but there was overhand pitching. So it starts to really take form when the railroads show up and tourism becomes huge. And that's when you start seeing lots of stuff. So here's an example of Delaware Academy, a team in the 1890s. You'll notice on their pants, they're wearing these, what I called quilted knickers. We actually use those for the Mountain Athletic Club because we're an 1890s team. They're incredible, actually. They have tons of padding on them, both on the back side and the front. They're pretty warm, I will admit. But baseball was played well into the fall. And that's I know that's an 1890s photo just simply from the period equipment used. And if you notice the mitt that's laying on the ground on the left-hand side of there, it doesn't have any webbing. So the mitts didn't have any webbing. That's a big difference of games back then. So in the 1890s and 1900, the tourism expanded in the region through the railroads. They become clubs in virtually every community. Some semi-pro teams started to form from Oneonta all the way through this county. And then we start to see really what develops the future Major League Baseball stars come out of this area. There are a few that I'll hit as we talk here. I'm just going to go through a number of cool pictures that I've uncovered with help from the Delaware County Historical Association and other sources. These are Hamden photos, 1891, the Hamden 9. There's another photo there, also from 1896. I thought that was interesting. I got this from the Schoolhouse Museum in Hamden. They have a nice baseball display there, and it talks about this photograph actually has a picture, not just of the team, but one of the members of the team. I can't remember if it's the manager or a player. Went on to become the first commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. So that's pretty neat to have that. And I think it's even cooler that the picture was taken in a forest, which, if you remember, Delaware County back then probably was only 20% forest land. So they had to actually walk over a little ways to get into the woods. So Delhi Baseball Club, this is 1908. I think it's interesting because the jerseys there have the vertical lettering along the button line, and that actually embodies what the Delhi Baseball Club looks like today. When the teams that play in the Delaware County Vintage Baseball Association play, the Delhi Club actually has, when they play on the road, they sometimes will play as the Delhi Baseball Club and wear jerseys just as you see here. And then when they play in Hamden, they play as the Hamden 9 because they're in Hamden and they want to represent. And so they also call themselves the Polecat Baseball Club of Hamden. And, and that's paying a nod to the Polecats, which were a team, popular after World War II in Hamden. There's a faded picture of a team in Treadwell, probably around 1910. This is great. So anybody know where the Long Flat is near Shinhopple along the East Branch of the Delaware? This is the Long Flat baseball team. I can imagine that they probably worked in a quarry or in a logging camp. And there is a nice long flat there to play baseball when it's not flooded. So as the railroad expands, Fleischmann's starts to develop. And this is kind of where I pivot my presentation because I'm a member of the Mountain Athletic Club and Fleischmann's, and that's where I've done extensive history, mostly for my own interest, but also, to convey that to people that come to watch our games. I also, in 2020, our field was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And because of that, I learned a great deal about the history of that particular team. So the rest of my presentation mostly focuses on the development of Fleischmann's, but that's actually, there's some pivots and some places where I will interject ties to the rest of the county as well. So as I mentioned, Fleischmann's becomes a destination for tourists after John Blish sold 160 acres of land on the hillside above what was Griffin's Corners. They built a series of mansions, and the family lived there. And the boys of Charles Fleischmann's, that being Max and Julius, moved there. And they moved there from Cincinnati in the summer. and they really wanted to continue playing baseball, which they had developed a love for, and for baseball in at least in eastern part of Delaware County. But I could argue that it was already pretty big all around the county. One thing the Fleischmans did is they like to promote themselves as like bringing baseball to the county. That is not the case at all. It was already pretty popular. They just made it more popular. So in August of in August of 1894 is the first time you see the Fleischmans 9 appearing in print. The picture there to your left, that was the baseball field in 1895 as it was constructed before there were houses along Wagner Avenue, arguably before it was even called Wagner Avenue. And then a number of local boys playing, in a farm. One thing I love to say in the Delhi Gazette or Delaware Gazette at the time, they said, that Julius Fleischman's had his dad look for a field that didn't have, where a hit in every direction didn't yield a home run. They were playing on hillsides, so they wanted a flat piece of ground. 1896, there was games in Fleischman's and Phoenicia. 1896, there's another game between Fleischman's and, let's see, who else played? Roxbury. So there you go. There's Roxbury showing up in the 1890s. And then they played a team from Shandaken in 96. All those are from the Pine Hill Sentinel, which is actually just over the hill from Bel Air Mountain. Pine Hill Sentinel has archives in Ulster Community College that we found. But then in 1897, it starts to show up as the Mountain Athletic Club. And that was the first printed reference. They took a walloping against the Cuban ex-Giants, or called the ex-Cuban Giants. And this is pretty cool. I found nothing on the club in 1898. And I think that's because Charles Fleischman's passed away in December of 1897, and Max was enlisted in the Spanish-American War. And Julius, at 17 years old, took over the family business, which is became the largest yeast manufacturer in the world. They had started grooming him at 16 years old. So in 1897, this is where things start to get really interesting. They show up in the newspaper. This is a Poughkeepsie Evening Enterprise. It talks about the catcher, Granville Whitaker, gets a letter in the mail from Julius Fleischman saying that they've ordered beautiful new blue uniforms with maroon trimmings. And the field has baseball grounds, a bicycle track. And remember, the bicycle, like the modern bicycle, probably 1895. That's actually in that picture. If you look in the back, there's a bicycle, and there's a track that they're sitting in front of. So pretty neat. Second to none in the state. And then they are now being completed at the Fleischmans. So they built the field in 1895. I think they just kept expanding on it in 97. It says, besides a big grandstand, there's a bandstand where the Fleischmans band will render music at every game. So these guys were getting serenaded by a band. So that's pretty cool. This is the only known photograph that I've been able to find with Max and Julius in uniform. Julius is in the center. Max is to his, it would be to his left, to our right. The gentleman in the cap and the sport coat in the back, turns out, is Harry Stevens Jr. If you don't know who Harry Stevens is, he's probably the most influential concessionaire in the history of concessions. He is purported to have developed the modern scorecard, the drinking straw, and the hot dog. And his company actually used to be, if for those who ever went to a hockey game in the 80s in the Broome County Arena, it was still called Harry M. Stevens Concessions at the time. It's since sold to Aramark or something, but his son, Harry Jr., would have been pouring beer at the Polo Grounds with the New York Giants at the time and coming up on the weekends to help the Fleischmans with their ball club. So I have this photograph, and this is on the back of it. And it says one name there, and I don't know if you can read it, but on the top it says on the first row, Honus Wagner. That's pretty cool. And people made a big deal out of this, rightfully so. Honus Wagner, arguably the best shortstop who ever played the game in the first class of the Hall of Fame. Big deal. However, I don't believe Honus is in the picture. That's the guy they say is Honus on the top left from the photograph, and that's Honus around in 1895 right under him. And I don't think they bear any resemblance to each other. So I don't know why, but I've since learned that people were confused. The woman who actually wrote this wrote that sometime in the 1940s and was confused. And that is told to me by her granddaughter, who gave me the photograph. She said, "This is my grandmother Ida's writing," and she was probably confused. So not Honus, which is a big deal. And we have a huge blog on our website about this whole thing. So then it was like, well, maybe it's this guy. Well, no, I'm sorry. So this guy was also on there, right behind his picture says the name Andy Coakley. Andy Coakley coached Lou Gehrig for Columbia University in the 20s. And it said that was Andy Coakley on the front. And he would have been 13 when this picture was taken in 1895. So not Andy Coakley. So anyways, the other thing is that people think that Wagner Avenue was named after Honus Wagner. Not true. So Wagner Avenue in Fleischmann's, where our ballpark still is at Fleischmann's Park, was named after a cottage that was the first house on the street, probably in that picture that I previously showed. It was called the Wagner Cottage. Had no affiliation with Honus at all. So there's that same picture as a script, an etching that appeared in the Commercial Tribune in Cincinnati in 1897. So I think that's pretty neat. That when we found that, we said, "Oh man, this is cool. It's going to tell us so much more." And it did. The article is actually fascinating. It says Harry Keeter. Harry Keeter's in there. Harry Keeter played shortstop with the team in 1897. They won 17 straight games, and Harry Keeter played for Yale and was a physician in Roxbury for many years and the head baseball coach there, and started what eventually became the Roxbury Nine. But he played, this is the one reference I have of him playing with Fleischmann's. So I thought that was pretty neat. We actually used to play a game with vintage baseball called the Keeter Cup. Every September we would play the Keeter Cup, and it was named after this guy. Also in this is interesting. We were playing teams in Poughkeepsie, the Wyndhams, the Grand Gorge. It says the Grand Gorges. I don't know if that was Grand Gorges or Grand Gourds, if they really called them the Gourds. That would be weird. Hudson's and Shortsville and the Waldens. So they were, this team was traveling with Pullman rail cars, I should mention. And then in 1899, they kind of blew up. They started traveling even more. They got some former professional players. And now Fleischmann's is in syndicated newspapers talking about how wonderful the ball field is. They're promoters, remember. They're actually charging gate receipts for people to go watch a game there. And then Wagner Avenue, actually, if you drive through Fleischmann's now and you drive down Wagner Avenue, you can see the big stately houses that were there. And they were there because of this place. That brought people in. And it's actually by John Blish, who actually still cuts the grass, a descendant of the original John Blish who sold them the land. He still cuts the grass sometimes at our field. It's my understanding that his grandfather sold Fleischmann's that land in order to build a tourist destination that would put us on the map and bring some money into the region. So from an economic development perspective, even way back then, that's pretty neat. I love this quote, and I'll read it for the folks here. It says, "Fleischmann's private baseball park. Julius Fleischmann's is the banner baseball crank." In the 1890s, baseball fans were called cranks. At his summer home in the Catskills, he maintains a baseball park that has all the fixins of the most complete home of the national game, a team upon which Mr. Fleischmann's and his brother play, and which contain men who have made reputations in the minor leagues, holds forth all summer at the Mountain Athletic Baseball Club grounds. Julius pays all. So I'm just going to rip through. They expand the roster. James Bug Holliday was at one time a home run champion, and he played for Cincinnati. So they start to get some of the Cincinnati players after they leave the bigs, and also some Cincinnati-born players that play in Fleischmann's before they go into the bigs. There's one example in 1899 of them hiring a guy right after he got released from the New York Giants, which turns out is Tom Coakley. And I never realized this, but that's probably the confusion with Andy Coakley in that 1897 photo, because his name it's actually pronounced Coakley. It's Tom Kokoloff, but it's actually pronounced Coakley. So that kind of solved that. But yeah, they would travel in a Pullman rail car down to the Rondout. They would get on a yacht. He had a 200-foot yacht on the Hudson. They'd float down the river, and then they'd go play a bunch of teams in Jersey City and all through New York City. And this time they beat them 33-3, and they called it Jersey's Waterloo. Fleischmann should mention they were the only plainclothes civilians allowed in McGraw's dugout, which is a pretty big deal. They did make an offer to purchase the New York Giants. It never panned out, but they bought the Reds and the Phillies a few years later. And when I say the Reds and the Phillies, do you think that they would allow an owner to own two baseball teams in the same league anymore? Probably not. That kind of syndicate ownership would probably be frowned upon by the owners group. However, they pulled it off back then. 1900 in Peekskill, they built the largest yeast plant in the world. It's the largest employer for. Yeah, well, that was the collusion, syndicate ownership. Yes, absolutely right.
They wanted to make a trade or something.
Sure. So, yeah, that we'll have to have a side conversation about that in baseball back then. If you ever seen the movie 8 Men Out, a lot of shenanigans were going on back then. But in 1900, they built this huge yeast plant on the Hudson River. It becomes the largest employer in Peekskill until 1975 when they closed. There's 150 buildings, a brick foundry, a beautiful port where they can bring in molasses, and they made all kinds of spirits there, as well as the yeast product, the fermentation process. They had basically a corner on the market for all the bakeries in New York City. And their baseball team becomes like the best. They now he bought out a sporting goods store team called Spinney Specials. Spinney was a sporting goods store owner in Cincinnati, and he basically shipped them all off to Fleischmann's and here in Delaware County. And they all lived there, and they played ball, and they traveled around. And word has it they won 56 games that year. They went 56-4. They had 4 different trips back to Cincinnati, which is pretty amazing considering, here's this band of guys that aren't even pro yet, and they beat a professional team. And this one, I love the end of this too. It says, crack private baseball team maintained solely for the diversion of himself and his friends by millionaire Mayor Julius Fleischmann of Cincinnati. I should mention that Julius became mayor of Cincinnati in 1900. And had that position. He was the youngest mayor at the time in Cincinnati history, and he held that until 1905. It says, fortunate indeed are the members of the Mountain Athletic Club constituting the private baseball team of Mayor Julius Fleischmann of Cincinnati. They wear a gaudy uniform of blue with the club name in red letters across their chest and travel only in Pullman cars. There you go. So, interesting. They also were often referred to as the Mountaineers or the Mountain Tourists. I love this. I've done a lot of research on our uniforms. It says the color is blue with Mountain AC across the breast of the shirt in red letters. So, I think what's interesting about this team, they had several guys that went on that were not just like side players in the dead ball era. They actually were big deal. The first being the center guy in the back. So you see, of course, Julius is still in the middle looking off kind of austerely. But the guy above him is Doc White. Doc was called Doc because he graduated from Georgetown, and he was a dentist in the off season. Doc was the third winningest left-handed pitcher for the first decade of the 20th century. He also won a World Series with the White Sox in 1906. He was a 30-game winner. He's a big deal. Doc White actually held a record for shutout innings for 64 years until Don Drysdale beat that record. If you remember Don Drysdale, that name. And Doc actually sent him a note as an 85-year-old man. He said, "No, I hope you break my record." The other guy next to him was Red Dune. Red Dune held a 91-year franchise record for games caught by the Phillies. He actually is buried in Rochester. He finished his career in Rochester with the Rochester Red Wings, which is still a minor league club, and is buried there. But Red Dune definitely won a big deal in dead ball era baseball. Whitey Rowe was another guy. His big claim to fame was he factored heavily in the win against the Chicago Cubs in the first World Series, where two teams from the same city were pitted against each other with the White Sox and the Cubs. They called that team the Hitless Wonders. Whitey Rowe had several of those hits. It was a very low-scoring series, but they beat him. Mordecai Brown, Three-Finger Brown, pitched in that series. Pete Cregan, shortstop. He's actually from Peekskill. They call him Peekskill Pete. He worked for the Fleischmann's Distillery in Peekskill. And then Barney McFadden, he's a guy who had a cup of coffee in the big leagues. But most notably underneath Julius in that photo is Miller Huggins. Miller Huggins was he's now in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, most notably for his managerial stint with the Murderers Row of the 20s and the great teams of the New York Yankees. He died in an early death, mostly, they say, due to stress from trying to chase Babe Ruth around all the time. And another guy on that team was Nick Outrock, who has basically had it was part of baseball for about 5 decades in both the White Sox and the Washington Senators organization. And Jack Keenan, who holds a dubious distinction. He's kind of the Fleischmann's Mountain Athletic Club. He's kind of our Moonlight Graham. He had one professional appearance before they never tendered him a contract. When the team went on the road back then, they didn't bring the pitchers who had just pitched. And the team disbanded while they were on the road, and they never offered him a contract. So he has one major league win in his record. They call him Blackjack Keenan. So there's Miller Huggins in a Mountain Athletic Club cabinet photo that I got from his biographer. And this is basically the shirt I'm wearing right now is fashioned after that. And he also, the thing that's interesting about Miller Huggins is his dad was a very strict Methodist, and he really did not, he frowned upon him playing baseball. So back then there were blue laws in New York State for where you couldn't play baseball on a Sunday. A lot of times these guys would play under aliases, not so much for the blue laws, but if they were being paid as a professional, they didn't want to also be paid as a semi-pro. So they would play under a different name and still get the money. He used to play under the name Proctor. But I do have a box score of a game in Albany where it shows Huggins in the box score. He also played with a Downsville native, Fred Odwell, which I'll mention. So this was the example. This is where they traveled to the Queen City, which is Cincinnati, and they beat the Reds. I mentioned that they beat the Reds by a score of 4-3. Miller Huggins was in that game playing as Proctor. After 1901, they did some more traveling. They continued to play even as far south as Knoxville, and they played in Chicago and different places. Fast forwarding now into a little bit more I'm going to get into more 20th century stuff, early 20th century, mind you. But the Cuban Giants were a traveling black club, and one of the cool things about Fleischmann's that's in the Museum of Memory is this photograph of the Cuban Giants when they played a 3-day series with the MAC in 1903. And in that, Bill Hippo Galloway played second base. Why is Bill Hippo Galloway important? Hippo Galloway is a Canadian-born player, and he was the last black player to play an integrated baseball game in 1899 before the color lines were drawn, and would last until Jackie Robinson broke them 46 or 47 years later. So Hippo Galloway is kind of a big deal in my opinion. And he played there, and we try to honor that when we play. We have some things we do for that kind of a distinction. I mentioned the boys, the Fleischman's brothers, go on from front lawn to front office. They go on to have a ownership stake in the Reds, and become pretty prominent. The first World Series was actually created by another owner, Brush, that was part of the ownership group there. So they had a hand in a lot of baseball, making baseball, taking it kind of to the next level from a marketing perspective. Back then the World Series were 9 games. In 1905, the Mountain Athletic Club continues. And here they are, the brothers are still there. Now they're mustached in this photograph. You see there's lots more houses behind them on Wagner Avenue. One of them, a lot of those houses are still standing today. So when our team takes pictures, it's great to see this picture pitted against one from back then in 1905. How did I determine this picture was 1905? Other people tried to tell me that it was 1895. We figured out it's 1905 because there's one gentleman that's on the right there, and that is Judson J. Kirk. He grew up in Fleischman's. He was born in Shandaken, but grew up in Fleischman's in the shadow of when they built the Mountain Athletic Club grounds. So he's watching as a young man. He's watching 7 years old. He's watching them build this baseball field. Then he, of course, gets to go play with the MAC, and he becomes shortstop. He gets drafted by Connie Mack. He goes into the Hudson Valley League. He plays throughout New York State. He played for the Binghamton Bingos. There's a picture, the team photo of the Binghamton Bingos that features Jay Kirk. And he's just a fantastic figure. And I'll talk a little bit more about Jay. Another guy in that picture is Abe Goldberg. They call him Goldie. And in 1909, he moved over to the Delhi Club, and then he managed a team called the Walton Riffraffs in 1910. So Jay Kirk, pretty cool guy. I mean, he's got one baseball card. I actually happen to have it. I used my COVID stimulus money to buy the most expensive piece of cardboard I probably ever will buy. But he mentions my hometown of Binghamton on the back of that cigarette card because that year he did. He broke into the bigs with the Boston Braves. That's Babe Ruth and Jay Kirk in 1921, which was Babe Ruth's big breakout season. And Jay and Babe were friends. Jay's grandfather actually gave me that photograph. He lives down in outside of Orlando, Florida. And Jay had a great career, raised a family in New Orleans, actually moved back to Delaware County, and he joined a team with his son that played in Margaretville for a number of years, Jay Kirk Jr. The cool thing, though, Jay Kirk, he's got this who's who of baseball in the dead ball era. Scored the only run in Cy Young's 511th career victory, probably unmistakably a record that'll never be broken. He got 2 hits off Babe Ruth in his first start at Fenway Park, got 3 hits off Walter Johnson in 15. In 21, he got a homer off Lefty Grove. I mean, the guy is just, he's peppered within dead ball era baseball stuff. And he grew up right here in Delaware County. He's honored in the New Orleans Sports Hall of Fame in 1965. And so the other guy, Goldie, they mentioned him. He moves west. After the Mountain Athletic Club, we believe they kind of disbanded or at least stopped playing a lot of games because several of their players start showing up. Do those pea coats look familiar? Right? Those 2 coats those guys are wearing, those are Mountain Athletic Club suits, right? Those were the same broad, with pearl buttons. And so I said, boy, that's kind of odd. And then I noticed how similar that gentleman looked to the guy in the previous photograph. And then I found in 1910 in the newspaper, it says, Goldie will manage the Walton Town Ball team. And it says, favorably known to the fans of Delaware County as Goldie, he's been asked to manage the Walton baseball team for the upcoming season. Goldie played with the Fleischman's team for many years, and last year he was captain of the Delhi team. He's a star center fielder and a heavy hitter. So just like we play today in Delaware County vintage baseball, we jump teams. We need players. I mean, they did it back then too. Cool thing about Goldie, that's actually a picture from the Delaware County Fairgrounds in 1910 of the Walton Riff Raffs. Cool thing about the Walton Riff Raffs, little side note, they actually, Goldie had a guy that he used to be a high school principal in the off season. And there was this kid down in the Bronx named Al Schott. He invited Al because the school board wouldn't let him play on scholastic baseball teams because he was making money playing baseball for semi-pro teams. They were like, well, you can't do both. So he quit school, I guess, and Al was like, hey, you want to play for this team I'm managing in Walton? So he comes up to Walton, and that guy actually, he won 13 games in a row for the Walton team that year, and he actually went on to have a great career in baseball, but he's most well known for his years as a vaudeville act with former Mountain Athletic Clubber Nick Altrock. These guys were baseball clowns, and sometimes they would draw 20,000 people just to see him do their vaudeville act on the dugout roof. Delaware County here. Some more information about the Mountain Athletic Club. I mean, this place became a tourist destination. There was even souvenir spoons made. You can't see it really well, but that's actually on the spoon is engraved the MAC grounds. And it's got basically the same image as in the postcard just below it, kind of etched into the spoon, with a nice brook trout on there too. I thought that was pretty cool. In 1906, that's actually a postcard that I have. It talks about won yesterday's game, 5-4, fine weather and having a good time. Charlie sent that to his sweetheart in Washington, D.C., or possibly his mother, who knows. And that was in 1906. So I got to think baseball was still being played in Fleischmann's in 6, but we don't know much after that. It's important how baseball ties into Fleischmann's history. This was a letter from Julius Fleischmann's attorney of the Fleischmann's Company asking Griffin Corners if they were going to incorporate as Fleischmann's. So he's saying basically, to what entity should we gift this land to? And they finally incorporated as Fleischmann's, the village of Fleischmann's, in 1913. And then that year they basically gift the land, and it was to be athletic grounds to remain a public park with free admission for all time. So that is hugely tied into the history of not just Fleischmann's, but baseball history in Delaware County. As I mentioned, we put that on the National Historic Registry in 2020, which was really a labor of love and taught me a tremendous amount about my club as well as baseball history in Delaware County. So some other notables I wanted to mention. I touched on Fred Odwell when I mentioned Miller Huggins. Fred Odwell has a historical marker in Downsville. If you drive through Downsville, right across from the Schoolhouse Museum, you'll see a historical marker, and it's for Fred Odwell, who spent parts of 4 seasons with Cincinnati and actually was the 1905 home run champion. He was born in Downsville, raised in Downsville, and died in Downsville. There's a little funny story if anybody knows Scott Gladstone, who's a friend of mine. Scott tells about his, I think his dad was bumped into Fred when he was fishing for trout one day. This is after Fred had retired, and Fred kind of he told the kids, you got a better chance on catching trout if you spit on the worm. So that's a Fred Odwell story. So Fred grew up 1892. That's a postcard from 1892 from Fred Odwell. And then a piece in the Walton Reporter for the nice folks of the women's club who actually paid tribute to the home run champ. Some other notables. This guy, Sam Tompkins, he's a Stanford guy. Sam, he had a great high school career with Stanford School and went on to play Double-A baseball, I believe. I think he made it maybe Single-A. He played for a team in Auburn, which was in the New York Penn League. Was an affiliate of the Boston Braves. Kyle Rockefeller, who's still with us and still doing well. Kyle, was a University of Maryland standout after graduating from South Courtright. And we continue to write these stories of all these baseball folks. And I'll touch back onto what the original title of the presentation was. Mentioned Honest Eddie. Honest Eddie was a guy who was part of the Black Sox scandal in 1918 or I'm sorry, 1919. And he was one that actually, why they call him Honest Eddie is because he was one of the guys who was actually not held accountable for the gambling scandal which became the subject of the movie 8 Men Out and obviously the demise of Shoeless Joe Jackson. So Honest Eddie is a legend. There's actually a statue in Hancock where you can actually go and see a statue of Honest Eddie. The other thing that was mentioned in the title, which is pretty interesting, kind of fun fact, I'm actually professional forester in my day job, and one of the mentions was Louisville Slugger, and Louisville Slugger used to own about 11,000 acres of land in Delaware and Broome County, and that was solely for the production of baseball bats. And they would send those logs to Larimer Norton, which is a plant in Hancock that shut down probably in the early 2000s. But they used to make what they call slugs. They used to make the raw bat stock, which would go down to their main plant in Troy, Pennsylvania, where they would actually make the Louisville Slugger bat. But there's a lot of connection between, and still to this day, this region produces major league quality baseball bats. And in fact, just the other night in the Home Run Derby, there was one of the players in that, Wilson Contreras for the Boston Red Sox, who actually uses a Cooperstown bat. And you bet that some of that wood that goes into his bats are procured from this region. So it's pretty neat that Delaware County has this strong connection, strong ties, strong history to the game of baseball, and it's kind of an integral part of our history here as well. So with that, I will just remind everybody that we're doing a community baseball game here in Delhi at the Legion Field after the parade on August 2nd. I believe it's at 3 o'clock. And anybody is welcome to join. He's at home. We're going to play 1864 rules, which means the balls are a little bit softer. You can catch them on a bounce. They can still hurt. So you have to be able-bodied, I suppose. But it is an inclusive game, and we want everybody to come out and support it, whether you play or you watch. We like to showcase what we do. And also tomorrow, if you're in Bovina and we get a break in the rain, we will play. But we have an 1867 rules match where my club, the Mountain Athletic Club, is going to take on the Bovina Dairymen to prepare them for going to what's called the World's Tournament, which is held every year at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. They're going to go there next weekend, and we want to give them a good kind of prep game to get them ready for that match. So with that, thank you to Delaware County. Thank you to Society of American Baseball Research. Thank you to John Thorne, as I mentioned, the official historian of Major League Baseball, and a number of other folks who continue to inform me and provide information. Delaware County Historical Association's on that list. The Middletown History Society's on that list. Fleischman's Museum of Memories. And of course, all my friends at, within Vintage Baseball in the community for supporting us. And we've really been able to grow something here that I think is connects a sense of place to our past and shows folks what baseball looked like back then, but also maybe what society was a little simpler times. So with that, I'll take any questions from the floor. Yes.
Okay. 19th century baseball. You talked about a game that was played between Delhi and Stamford.
Yes.
I'm wondering how did they get all those guys to the game? There was no railroad.
Yeah, so in 1873, you can imagine it's probably why they played for 4 hours. They really want to apparently get their money's worth, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, all I can do is suggest that they probably jumped on horse and buggy and they went up what was then Route 10, I suppose, not long before it was called Route 10. I don't know. And they traveled to Stamford and they probably spent the night. Probably humbled after have their.
How they transported the team or none of that, right? There weren't big wagons with guys in it.
That's hard to say. I mean, like I said, there's really a void in my research about like what baseball here in Delaware County looked like between that time of like, post Civil War to 1890. There's not a whole lot. And it's a field of research that, I could go down the rabbit hole with for a long time. And I probably will eventually.
So I have one more question.
Yeah, Gary, what's up?
For that game in August.
Yes.
You bring your own seating, right?
Oh yeah. I think there'll be some bleachers out there, but I would. All of our games are really there. It's this game or the others. They're all free. I always tell people to bring a picnic if you want. Bring lunch. Bring a blanket. And just it's pretty simple stuff. Yeah. I'd love to see you there.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
During World War II, the history of baseball, women played baseball. There were a number of women.
Yes.
Did Delaware County have any
Oh.
that were influential in baseball?
Gosh, I love that you asked that question. We know that in the 1890s, there were teams, all women teams in the 1890s that played schedules that would rival a major league schedule today, like 150 games a year, all women teams playing other all women teams and some all mixed gender teams as well as men's teams. As far as Delaware County, another field of research that could be delving into. I would love to find that. We know a lot about what the Hamden Heifers, and we hear about more recent 20th century baseball and stuff. But man, I would love to find out. We actually have our vintage games. We have women that play on our clubs, and that's historically accurate. I mean, it's amateur baseball. It would not surprise me a bit if you went back in town to found that there were women playing with the teams in Bovina or Delhi or Stanford. But yeah, I don't know of any all women's teams or even but I think that there probably was. I mean, just a guess, and I'd love to learn more. I mean, it's another rabbit hole to jump down. Yeah, great question. Actually, today it's interesting. I got an email about a game called a movie that's coming out that's being debuted at the Hamilton Film Festival in Hamilton, New York, next Monday, on the 20th, called Her Game is Hardball. And some of that movie was filmed in Bovina and Fleischmann's, where they took our uniforms and they recreated women's baseball as it would have looked like in the 1890s. And historian Bill Burns is actually, he has the only speaking role in the whole documentary. But it's all about women in baseball. And right now, Women's Professional Baseball League is going to be launching next month. There's going to be 4 teams, and they're starting their season outside of Chicago. And I think it's blowing up. And we had a couple of those people who were on the Women's Professional Baseball League playing with our teams in Bovina and Fleischmann's. And it's actually really exciting to see that, because what we do is really inclusive. We want people to just come out and play for the love of the game. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. Great talk.
Yes.